Hello and welcome to episode 10 of my Kerbal Space Program Realistic Space Program series. When we last left off, we retrieved some science from some moon landings and just need to figure out how to spend it now. Trying to figure out where to go from here. In order to perfect my two-stage lander, I need to continue a little further down this tree. But around the time of the Apollo program was when the first visits to the first flybys of Mars started to happen, so I really think I need to unlock these larger dishes to begin with, which I believe is what I'm going to do. And after a quick cut to chop out all my construction video, just because it's really boring and took me a while to develop, put together a Duna flyby mission, unmanned probe. It's pretty I got a lot of science experiments and equipment on it, and I got really lucky. I was just a couple days out from a Duna window, and close enough that I really wasn't worried. I just want to go straight to the launch, so I built this sucker and started putting it in orbit. Actually turned into one of my more efficient launches as far as my my launch profile went, because I was able to get quite a bit of lateral velocity out of these main engines before they cut out and I had to separate. And once you get up to about 55 kilometers, there's really no need to hang on to those fairings, but just to be extra special, I guess I hung on to them till I got out of the atmosphere at 70, but still ditched them when they themselves were suborbital. So this is going to be kind of the equivalent of the Mariner 4, which was the first American probe to go by Mars. And here I am finding out that deleting the remote tech plugin has pretty much made all my antennas inoperative. I had to go and mess with the configuration file to get them where they could work as a science transmitter again. But anyway, back to Mariner 4. It launched in 1964, which was just shortly after really the Apollo program got rolling at full tilt. And if I remember correctly, it didn't arrive at Mars until 1966. End of mission was 1967. So this is me trying to get as efficient an orbit or transfer to Duna as I can get, which interplanetary transfers are really not my forte yet. I need to work on it, but and being slightly out of phase from what an ideal transfer would be is just an extra little curveball thrown my way. But I eventually stopped messing with it. I figured that's close enough, I can make an adjustment later. Now, I'm trying to aim for an equatorial approach, which I really don't know why, because the I do have mapping modules on board this, so a polar orbit would probably, well, is going to be what I'm going to aim for eventually. Nice beauty shot of the night side. Do my transfer burn. Gonna go ahead and hang on to that transfer stage as much as I can. But just boring unmanned transfer to Duna. Have to set a reminder for that correction maneuver later. And for one of the very few times I actually successfully deployed my solar panels beforehand, so I didn't run out of power mid-transfer. Once again, trying to figure out where I want to go technology-wise. which is always fun. And to start a new little project. So in my lunar explorations, I found that my cruise range has been pretty severely limited. So I have decided, I really don't like any of the ways you can attach a rover to a lander. You either have to put an identical one as a counterweight on the opposite side, and with Ferrum that's really not an option. It'll just wreck my aerodynamics. So there's no real elegant way of doing it. So what I have decided is I'm going to put rovers at predetermined landing sites and then just bring my crews to them. It's not even remotely historically accurate, but really saves me the effort of having to go through the radial attachment of a rover subassembly, which I have done before. I don't like the way it looks, and I don't like the way my vessels fly. I usually end up with one axis, my rotation is extremely fast, and the other axis is just painfully slow, and it makes correcting your landing approach just almost impossible. But this was a launch failure. Forgot. Yes, came up too shallow, and when I tried to bring the nose up, I was a little too violent and the whole rocket broke apart. They are locking the doors in mission control today. That's a nice little preview of the little rover I've got built. And here I have it actually landing. Finally brought it down. It was just a boring lunar transfer. Everybody's seen one. I love these little radial engines. They're probably one of my favorite things to use to bring down small rovers and things like that. It's got a pretty impressive thrust to weight ratio bringing it down. And the theory, anyway, was that I could set this down and then detach my rover. And I would set it down and then tilt the platform over and detach the rover, and everything would be fine. It did not quite work out that way, as you're about to see. Because that is an insane incline that I've landed on. And I thought about relocating to the center of the crater. But unfortunately, I wasn't quite able to pinpoint where that was. I think if I'd gone a little further, I would have nailed it. Slowly bring it to a stop. Which that's one thing I wish could get adjusted. Demonstrating how you can actually walk something along the surface using just reaction wheels. But I really wish surface friction in Kerbal Space Program could be somehow increased. That would probably cause a whole bunch of problems with rovers and space planes, but it just doesn't seem quite plausible how much these things slide. But yes, I was going smooth, wonderful deployment, and then it goes into a death tumble. I start to panic, and I was trying to get the pod in front of the rover to get it stopped. And then I ran out of electricity. because the solar panels were actually on board the rover. So had a nice couple brief moments. Thankfully nothing broke of my driverless rover tumbling down while the delivery system just kind of rattled around in the background. I was hoping time warp could save me, but not so much. But it does eventually level out and come to a stop. Unfortunately, it stops upside down. So I'm going to have to come up with a plan for getting it back. So quite unintentionally, I just made the discovery while preparing my Apollo 13 mission for its, actually after finishing the transfer burn. I don't have enough food to actually land on the moon. I selected an older model of my Saturn V rocket that does not have provisions for an actual landing. So much like the actual Apollo 13 mission, these guys will be flying around and not making their landing. Probably rather upsetting for these guys to see the moon float by and understand that another crew is going to have to take their landing site. And so we'll time and accelerate through the rest of this because it's just boringness. But I did discover that, or it would be this one mission where I finally figured out the secret to a free return trajectory. Of course, that doesn't help me much. And I'm starting to have kind of a crisis of conscience lately because with version 0.24 coming out and the way I was too non-judicious in my mod selection, I've pretty well jacked my game file up pretty good. Just about got whacked by the service module there. Some wonderful explosions as it starts to burn up. And the lander starts coming back at me. Starting to panic a little. But anyway, with 0.24 coming out, and the instabilities and just general wreckage I've wreaked on my save file, I'm wondering, especially since 0.24 is adding the one feature as a core, the one thing I was worried about, budgets. It was the whole purpose of this series that I later axed because of tedium. Looking at some of the returns, watching some of the preview videos, it seems like it's going to be a much more viable option than Mission Control Extended. So I'm starting to wonder if maybe I should prepare myself to start this series or something similar to it over. And yes, the blank screens were because this thing ran out of electricity. On the return void, somehow I set my periapps just correctly that it skipped back up for another pass. But back to what I was saying. So I'm really debating. I've got some footage in the can for another episode because, again, nobody knows exactly when 0.24 is going to come out. And even then, it's going to take a while for my mods that I want to use to get updated. So it's all up in the air, but this series is on Death Watch, as it would be, because one, I've just absolutely, pretty much effectively ruined this game file. But with the crew of Apollo 13 returned safely, Apollo 14 boosts into orbit to make the scientific discoveries that were originally intended for their comrade. Zip. It's another boring liftoff. So I hate to go back to the early days of absolutely no parts and no science, but I had Remote Tech, then it was gone. I had Mission Control Extended, then I took it out. I had Interstellar, and then I took it out. With 64-bit RAM support and the updated contracts and budget system, I really am leaning in the direction of scrapping this and going with a new one. But at the same time, I'm also really reluctant to do so because I just now finally got into the Apollo program. I may splice things a bit. I haven't fully made up my mind. I could also just end this save and, you know, on my own initiative, work up to the point where I get... I'm not going to create a new save and then just edit science into it. That's a bridge too far for me. Yes, we set Capella 14 on our newly discovered free return trajectories. Still setting periaps at 0 initially so we can drop the transfer booster onto the moon. Or rather, that's the intent. The lovely figure 8 of a free return trajectory. And what, for anybody who doesn't know, which there could very well be people who don't know, free return basically means that you launch your craft in such a way as the body you're aiming for is, and this is for primarily for moons and orbital bodies like that. You set your craft up in such a way as you pass just ahead of the body you're trying to intercept. And what this does is, as you pass in front, the other body's gravity pulls you back down and instead of where you come in behind and you get accelerated out. This works in such a way as I could eject everything on this craft at this point, and it would re-enter Kerbin's atmosphere without me having to touch anything. I say that, but what would probably happen is the ejection force from the top decoupler would probably move me just a couple tenths of meters a second, and, well, a couple millimeters a second. Let's use actual measurements here. And it would probably have messed me up, but it is possible to get a total free return trajectory out of this game. As you can see, that's an extremely steep re-entry angle. With deadly re-entry, if I'd just gone with that, I would kill my Kerbals. I'm just messing around trying to figure out what to do. Trying to keep that periaps from just getting ridiculously high, but there we go. I've got a 15-kilometer periaps at the moon and a 30-kilometer periaps at Kerbin. So it's actually a very safe trajectory to be on. I could very easily just float this way out and come on home. However, these guys are going to land to make up for Apollo 13's failure, which once again was not pre-planned. It was just my own stupidity. I'd created another Kerbal Space Program install and I copied my persistent file over, but I didn't copy any of my craft. And so I just grabbed the latest save that I had on that, and that happened to be my Apollo 10. I don't think I even had fuel in the lander. In fact, on this mission, I know I don't have any fuel in the lander, and in order to complete it, I have to transfer fuel from my service module into the lander in order to make my landing. It's been a while since I've used raster prop monitor and the IVA view to make a limb extraction. I'm just setting it up and keeping the eye glued to that camera. Use a little delta V from the decoupler to nudge us in there. And now we start adjusting the orbit so we can drop the booster onto the transfer stage onto the surface of the moon. And we're this far out that just a couple meters a second will make a big difference, so we're just modifying the orbit with RCS. And once we ditch the transfer stage, still trying to keep things on a free return. Although at this point I've pretty much committed myself to a landing. I think I had noticed my fuel shortage at this point. Here we are landing on stolen fuel. Little bounce as we hit. Our brave heroes of Capella 14 succeeding where the idiot running the program had caused their comrades to fail. And the surface ablation laser is a D-Magic orbital science part, if I hadn't said that before. I've got a bunch of science experiment mods that I use, just because I think they're kind of neat and they add a little fun to it. I have the Cacti space telescope, and I could actually put one in orbit, but if anybody's figured out by now, I'm trying to stay at least somewhat realistic, and I have a unnatural love for the shuttle program, so I'm waiting until my space shuttle is operational to deploy my space telescope. I'm really looking forward to getting to that point because it's a very early alpha stage of development for that mod, but just playing around with what they've got, I think it's going to be something truly special. Once they're finished, I think it could become as well known as things like MechJeb and Ferrum Aerospace and Keythane, because for a nerd such as me, it's pretty neat. You can actually point it at Joule, and different imaging processors have different magnifications, and you can actually get a view of the Julian system that looks like some of the pictures that the Hubble Space Telescope has taken from Kerbin's orbit. In fact, if I do scrap this save, I'm probably going to do a video in sandbox mode of just that mod. It's an idea I just came up with on the spot right now. And lamenting the idiocy of their program director. But they have some extra mission parameters here, but that will have to wait for a later video, running into my time limit. So, thank you for watching.